It's an honor to meet you, sir. Your service is truly inspiring.
The heavy oak doors of London's ancient Guildhall swung open, and time seemed to pause. Inside, centuries of history waited to witness a moment that would bind two nations once torn apart by war. She walked forward graceful, composed, carrying the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders. Across the grand hall, the German president stood, his eyes reflecting both respect and the gravity of this meeting. But beneath the glittering chandeliers and formal smiles, something unexpected was about to unfold. What began as a routine diplomatic visit would become a powerful reminder that even royalty carries scars, hopes, and the burden of healing a complicated past. If you love stories about royalty, history, and the hidden emotions behind world events, hit that like button right now. Subscribe so you never miss incredible true stories like this one, and share this with anyone who appreciates the human side of diplomacy. Trust me, you'll want to see where this goes. Now let's dive into what really happened that day. The morning sun painted London's streets with golden light as black cars lined up outside the Guildhall. Inside one of those cars sat Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal Anne. She looked out the window at the old building where kings and queens had walked for hundreds of years. Today was not just another royal duty. Today, she would meet the President of Germany, and this meeting carried more weight than most people could imagine. Anne adjusted her pearl necklace and took a quiet breath. She had done this 1,000 times before. Meeting world leaders was part of her life, but something about today felt different. Germany and Britain shared a long history, some parts beautiful, some parts painful. Wars had been fought. Families had been torn apart. Yet here they were, decades later, trying to build bridges instead of walls. Her assistant sitting beside her reviewed the schedule one more time. Your Royal Highness, the President will arrive in approximately 10 minutes. The Lord Mayor will greet you first at the entrance, then escort you to the reception hall. There will be a brief private conversation before the public ceremony. Anne nodded, but said nothing. She was thinking about her grandfather, King George VI, who had led Britain through the darkest days of World War II. She thought about the stories her mother, Queen Elizabeth II, had told her about those times. The fear, the courage, the sacrifices. And now, she was about to shake hands with a German leader as a friend, not an enemy. History had a strange way of turning full circles. The car stopped. Outside, photographers gathered like hungry birds, their cameras ready to capture every moment. Security officers stood at attention, their eyes scanning the crowd. The Lord Mayor of London, dressed in his official robes and chains, waited at the grand entrance. When Anne stepped out of the car, a small cheer rose from the crowd of onlookers who had gathered to see her.
She smiled warmly and waved. This was the Princess Royal people knew. Always professional, always graceful, never showing if she was nervous or tired. She walked toward the entrance with confident steps, her blue dress catching the sunlight. The Lord Mayor bowed respectfully. Your Royal Highness, welcome to the Guildhall. It is our great honor to host this historic meeting today. Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Guildhall always feels like stepping back in time, doesn't it? And replied with genuine warmth in her voice. As they walked through the massive wooden doors and felt the temperature drop, the ancient stone walls held centuries of memories. She could almost hear the echoes of past gatherings, past celebrations, past conflicts. The hallway was decorated with flags of both nations, British and German, hanging side by side. Flowers filled every corner, their sweet smell mixing with the scent of old wood and history. Staff members lined the corridor, standing straight and formal, and greeted several of them with kind words and brief conversations. She never treated people as if they were invisible, and this quality made her beloved by many who worked in royal circles. A young woman holding a bouquet of flowers looked nervous as Anne approached. "Are those for me?" and asked gently. "Yes, Your Royal Highness," the young woman whispered, her hands shaking slightly. "They're beautiful. Thank you so much." and took the flowers and smelled them, making the young woman smile with relief and pride. The Lord Mayor guided her toward a private waiting room. "The German president's motorcade has just arrived, Your Royal Highness. He will be brought here shortly," and sat down in an elegant chair and placed the flowers on a nearby table. Her mind wandered to the purpose of this visit. The president had come to Britain to strengthen economic ties, discuss environmental cooperation, and most importantly, to honor the friendship between two nations that had once been bitter enemies. This meeting at the Guildhall symbolized reconciliation, forgiveness, and the hope that future generations would never know the horrors of war between their countries. She heard footsteps approaching. Her heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the awareness of this moment's significance. The door opened, and palace officials entered first, followed by German diplomats, and then him, the President of Germany, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes. Both stood. For a brief second, they simply looked at each other. Two people representing two great nations. Two individuals carrying the hopes and memories of millions. Then, almost simultaneously, they smiled. "Your Royal Highness, it is truly an honor," the president said in English with a slight accent, extending his hand, and took his hand firmly. "Mr. President, welcome to London. We are delighted to have you here." The handshake lasted just a moment, but cameras outside the room would later describe it as warm and genuine. They sat down together, and for the next 20 minutes, they spoke privately. No cameras, no reporters, just two human beings discussing the world, their hopes for peace, and their shared responsibility to remember the past while building a better future. Outside, crowds waited. Inside the Grand Hall, preparations continued for the public ceremony. But in that quiet room, something more important was happening. Understanding was being built, respect was being shared, and history was being honored in the most meaningful way possible. The Grand Hall of the Guildhall sparkled with light from enormous chandeliers hanging from the high ceiling. Hundreds of candles flickered in golden holders along the walls. The room had been prepared for this moment for weeks. Every detail had been checked and rechecked. Red carpets covered the ancient stone floors. Chairs were arranged in perfect rows, filled with diplomats, government officials, business leaders, and members of both British and German communities living in London. And then the German president walked side by side toward the main hall. Their private conversation had gone well. They had discussed climate change, youth education programs, and shared concerns about keeping peace in an uncertain world. But more than that, they had connected as human beings who understood the heavy responsibility of leadership. As the large doors opened, everyone in the hall stood up. The sound of chairs moving created a wave of noise that echoed off the stone walls, and felt the weight of hundreds of eyes watching her. She had experienced this countless times, yet it never became completely ordinary. Beside her, the president maintained his composure, though she noticed his hands clasped tightly together. They walked down the center aisle together. A military band began playing the British national anthem, followed immediately by the German anthem, and stood perfectly still, her hand over her heart. She glanced sideways and saw tears forming in the eyes of an elderly German woman sitting in the front row. The woman's hand trembled as she touched her chest, and wondered what memories were flooding through that woman's mind. Had she lived through the war? Had she lost family members? Had she ever imagined she would stand in London, watching her president honored in a British ceremony? When the music ended, the Lord Mayor stepped forward to give the welcome speech. His voice was strong and clear as it filled the hall. Today marks not just a diplomatic visit, but a celebration of friendship that has grown from the ashes of conflict. We welcome President Schmidt not as a stranger, but as a cherished friend of the British people. Applause erupted, and clapped politely, watching the president's face. He seemed genuinely moved by the warmth of the reception. When the applause faded, the president was invited to speak first. He walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the audience. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he began, his voice slightly shaky at first, but growing stronger with each word. "Your Royal Highness, Lord Mayor, distinguished guests, dear friends, I stand before you today with a heart full of gratitude and humility. My grandmother used to tell me stories about London during the war. She spoke of the sirens, the fear, the destruction. She never imagined that her grandson would one day stand here, welcomed with such generosity and friendship. He paused, visibly emotional. The hall was completely silent. Even the photographers stopped clicking their cameras. We cannot change history. We cannot undo the pain our nations caused each other. But we can choose how we move forward. We can choose to build instead of destroy. We can choose friendship instead of fear. And we can promise that future generations will inherit a world where German and British children grow up as friends, not enemies. The applause that followed was different from before. It was slower, deeper, more meaningful. People weren't just clapping out of politeness. They were clapping because they felt something real, and watched a middle-aged British man in the audience wipe his eyes. His wife held his hand tightly. Perhaps his father had fought in the war. Perhaps he had grown up hating Germany, and now he was witnessing this moment of healing. When it was Anne's turn to speak, she approached the podium with grace. She didn't need notes. The words came from her heart. Mr. President, you honor us with your presence and your honest words. My family has witnessed the worst of what war can do. We have also witnessed the best of what peace can achieve. Today, we stand together not to forget the past, but to prove that forgiveness and friendship are possible, even after the deepest wounds. She looked directly at the elderly German woman who had cried earlier. Their eyes met, and then gave her a small, understanding nod. In this very hall, centuries ago, leaders made decisions that led to conflict. Today, in this same hall, we make decisions that lead to cooperation, understanding, and hope. That is the true measure of progress. The applause was thunderous. People stood again, this time spontaneously. The president and shook hands once more, and this time, cameras captured something remarkable. They weren't just shaking hands as political figures. They were smiling like old friends, like two people who genuinely respected each other. After the formal speeches, there was a reception. Waiters moved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne and small appetizers, and moved gracefully from group to group, speaking with German business owners who had built successful companies in Britain, British veterans who had fought in Germany and now worked for peace organizations, and young students who were part of exchange programs between the two countries. She stopped at the elderly German woman who had cried, "May I ask your name?" and said gently, "Maria, Your Highness, Maria Hoffman. It's wonderful to meet you, Maria. Have you lived in London long?" 52 years, Your Highness. I came here after the war ended. I was frightened at first. I thought people would hate me, but they welcomed me. They gave me a chance at a new life," and took Maria's hand. "Thank you for being here today. Your presence means more than you know." Maria's eyes filled with fresh tears, but this time they were tears of joy, not sorrow. The reception continued in the grand hall, filled with quiet conversations and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses, and moved through the crowd with practiced ease, but her mind was working carefully. She noticed everything. The way the German president laughed genuinely with a British businessman. The way young students from both countries chatted excitedly in a corner, their different accents mixing together. The way old wounds were slowly healing in this beautiful, historic room. A palace aide approached her quietly. "Your Royal Highness, there is someone who specifically requested to meet you. A German war veteran named Heinrich Müller. He is 93 years old and traveled from Berlin just for this event." Anne's interest sparked immediately. "Where is he?" The aide pointed to a wheelchair near the tall windows. An old man sat there, wearing his military medals on his jacket. His hand shook slightly, and his face was marked with deep lines that told stories of a long, difficult life. Beside him stood a younger woman, probably his granddaughter, who looked nervous and walked over without hesitation. As she approached, the old man tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him, and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "Please don't stand. I'm honored to meet you, Mr. Müller." The old man looked up at her with watery blue eyes. For a moment, he couldn't speak. His granddaughter helped translate, though the old man understood some English. "Your Highness," he began in German, his voice cracking. His granddaughter translated quickly. "I never thought I would live to see this day. I fought against Britain. I dropped bombs on London. I caused death and destruction to your people." The room seemed to grow quieter around them, though the reception continued. Several people nearby stopped their conversations, sensing something important was happening, and knelt down beside the wheelchair, surprising everyone. Princesses don't usually kneel, but Anne wasn't thinking about protocol. She was thinking about this human being in front of her. "Mr. Mueller, you were a young man following orders in a terrible time. We all carry the weight of history, but we don't have to carry it alone." Tears rolled down the old man's cheeks. "I have lived with guilt for 70 years. Every night I see the faces. I hear the sounds. I came here today because I want to say I am sorry. I wanted to ask for forgiveness before I die." His granddaughter's voice shook as she translated. She was crying too, and reached out and took the old man's trembling hand in both of hers. The room was completely silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. The German president, who had been across the room, walked over slowly, understanding something profound was happening. "Mr. Mueller," and said softly but clearly, "you have carried this burden long enough. On behalf of my family, my country, and all those who suffered, I want you to know that you are forgiven. You are welcome here. You are at peace now." The old man broke down completely, sobbing like a child. His granddaughter hugged him, crying into his shoulder, and remained kneeling, still holding his hand, giving him time to release decades of pain and guilt. The German president stood beside them, his own eyes wet. He placed his hand on the old veteran's other shoulder. "Heinrich, you're not alone. We all share this history. We all work toward healing." Several photographers captured the moment, but they did so quietly, respectfully. This wasn't just a photo opportunity. This was real. This was human. This was the true meaning of reconciliation. After a few minutes, Heinrich Mueller calmed down. He looked at him with new eyes, as if a massive weight had been lifted from his soul. "Thank you," he whispered in English. "Thank you," and stood up slowly, still holding his hand for a moment longer. "Thank you for your courage in coming here today. Thank you for seeking peace." The granddaughter spoke through her tears. "Your Highness, you have given my grandfather the greatest gift. He can finally rest." As Anne stepped back, spontaneous applause broke out across the hall. People weren't clapping for the princess or the president. They were clapping for what they had just witnessed. Forgiveness, healing, humanity at its best. The German president embraced Heinrich Mueller, speaking to him quietly in German, and watched, feeling her own emotions rising. She thought about her grandmother, who had endured the London Blitz. She thought about all the families torn apart by war. She thought about how easy it is to hate and how hard it is to forgive. But forgiveness was the only path forward. Hate only created more hate. Anger only created more anger. Someone had to break the cycle. A British war veteran, who had been standing nearby, approached slowly. He was in his 90s too, walking with cane. He had heard everything. "May I?" he asked, and gesturing toward Heinrich, and nodded, understanding immediately what he wanted to do. The British veteran extended his hand to the German veteran. Two old soldiers who had once tried to kill each other now looked into each other's eyes. "We were both young and foolish," the British veteran said. "We both suffered. Let's be old and wise together." Heinrich took his hand, and they shook firmly. Then, surprising everyone, they embraced. Two enemies became brothers in that moment. The entire hall erupted in applause again, louder this time. People were crying openly now, not caring about appearing professional or composed. This was bigger than politics. This was bigger than diplomacy. This was a human spirit choosing love over hate. And step back, allowing the moment to belong to these two brave men. The president stood beside her. "Your Royal Highness," he said quietly, "this is why we do this work. For moments like this," and nodded, unable to speak for fear her voice would crack with emotion. After the powerful moment between the two veterans, the reception continued with a different energy. People spoke more openly, smiled more freely, and the invisible walls between nations seemed to crumble a little more. and excused herself briefly, needing a moment to collect her thoughts. The emotions of the day had affected her more deeply than she had expected. She walked to a quiet corridor just outside the main hall. Large paintings of past Lord Mayors hung on the walls, their stern faces watching over centuries of London history, and stood before a window, looking out at the city she'd served her entire life. The afternoon sun was beginning to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ancient buildings. "Your Royal Highness?" And turned to find the German president standing a few feet away. He looked tired but peaceful, as if the day's events had drained him emotionally, but in a good way. "Mr. President, please come join me," and said warmly. He walked to the window and stood beside her. For a moment, neither spoke. They simply looked out at London together, two leaders sharing a quiet moment away from cameras and crowds. "What happened in there?" The president finally said, with Heinrich Müller. "That was not planned." "No," and agreed. "The best moments never are. You did something remarkable. You gave that man peace. You gave him what he needed most." And shook her head gently. "I only said what needed to be said." The courage was his. He traveled all this way, at 93 years old, to face his past. That takes extraordinary strength. The president nodded thoughtfully. "My grandfather also fought in the war. He never spoke about it. He died with all those memories locked inside him. I wish someone had given him permission to let go of his guilt the way you gave Heinrich today." And looked at him with understanding. "We all carry ghosts, don't we? Your grandfather, Heinrich, that British veteran, my own family. The war touched everyone. It changed everyone. Do you think we can truly move beyond it?" the president asked. "Or will our countries always be defined by that conflict?" And considered the question carefully. "I think every generation gets to choose. My mother chose to welcome Germany back into the community of nations. She chose cooperation over resentment. Now my generation must make the same choice. And your children's generation will face that choice too. History doesn't disappear, but we decide what we do with it." The president smiled sadly. "You are wise, Your Royal Highness. Wiser than many politicians I have met. I've simply lived long enough to see that hatred never solves anything. It only creates more problems for the next generation to clean up." They heard footsteps approaching. An aide appeared, looking apologetic for interrupting. "Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, forgive me, but the press is requesting a joint photograph in the main hall. They would like to capture both of you with the two veterans who embraced." And the president exchanged glances. "Of course," and said, "Let's give them their photograph." They walked back into the main hall together. Heinrich Müller and the British veteran, whose name was Arthur Thompson, had been brought to the center of the room. Both old men looked exhausted but happy, as if a lifetime of burden had been lifted. The photographers arranged everyone carefully and stood between the two veterans, with the president on the other side. The four of them posed together, creating an image that would appear in newspapers across the world the next morning. But before the cameras flashed, something unexpected happened. Arthur Thompson spoke up in his rough, aged voice. "Your Highness, if I may say something?" "Of course, Mr. Thompson. I hated Germans for 60 years. 60 years of my life wasted on hate. My wife told me I was a fool. She said hate was poison. I didn't listen. But today, meeting Heinrich, hearing his story, seeing his pain, I realized we were both victims of the same evil. We were both used by men who wanted power and didn't care who died for it." Heinrich nodded vigorously, understanding even though Arthur spoke in English. Arthur continued, his voice growing stronger. "If two old fools like us can forgive each other, then anyone can. That's what I want people to know. It's never too late to choose peace." The room erupted in applause once more. The photographers captured everything, their cameras clicking rapidly, and felt tears threatening to fall, but she held them back. She had to remain composed, professional, but inside, her heart was breaking and healing at the same time. This was why she did this work. This was why royal duties mattered, not for the ceremonies or the fancy clothes or the attention, but for moments like this, when real change happened in human hearts. After the photographs, and spent more time speaking with both veterans, she learned that Heinrich had been a pilot, just 19 years old when he flew bombing missions over London. Arthur had been a firefighter, pulling bodies from burning buildings after those same bombing raids. Did you ever imagine you would be friends? And asked them. Both men laughed, a sound filled with irony and joy mixed together. Never. Heinrich said through his granddaughter's translation, "I thought I would die hated and alone. I thought I would die angry," Arthur added. But here we are, two silly old men who finally figured out the truth. What truth is that? The president asked, genuinely curious. Arthur and Heinrich looked at each other, then back at their audience. Arthur spoke for both of them, that we're all just human, just scared, confused humans trying to survive in a complicated world. The uniforms and flags and politics, they try to make us forget that, but underneath everything, we're all the same. We all bleed. We all cry. We all want to go home to people we love. And place her hand on Arthur's shoulder. "Mr. Thompson, you should give speeches." "No, thank you, Your Highness. I've said my piece. Now I just want to enjoy whatever time I have left." Part 5, The Legacy. The evening sun cast long shadows across the Guildhall as the reception began to wind down, and stood near the tall windows, watching the light change colors on the ancient stone walls. The day had been more emotionally powerful than anyone had expected. What started as a formal diplomatic visit had transformed into something deeply human and unforgettable. The German president approached her, holding 2 cups of tea. "Your Royal Highness, I thought you might need this. It has been quite a day," and accepted the tea with a grateful smile. "Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, it has been extraordinary. I don't think any of us anticipated what would happen with Mr. Mueller." They stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, both watching the guests mingle. Heinrich Mueller was still surrounded by people, including several British veterans who wanted to shake his hand and speak with him. His granddaughter looked overwhelmed but happy, constantly wiping tears from her eyes. "You know," the president said thoughtfully, "when I was preparing for this trip, my advisors gave me thick folders of talking points, economic statistics, and political strategies. But none of that mattered today. What mattered was 2 old soldiers finding peace. What mattered was a princess kneeling beside a wheelchair. What mattered was humanity." And nodded slowly. "My grandmother used to tell me that real leadership isn't about grand speeches or perfect ceremonies. It's about the small moments when you choose compassion over protocol, understanding over judgment." Today reminded me of that lesson. A young British journalist approached him nervously, holding a small recording device. "Excuse me, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President. May I ask one question for tomorrow's paper?" And the president exchanged glances. Usually, official questions went through proper channels and press secretaries. But today had been a day of breaking normal patterns. "Go ahead," and said kindly. The journalist, who couldn't have been older than 25, asked, "What do you hope young people like me will remember about today?" The president answered first. "I hope you remember that forgiveness is not weakness. It takes more courage to forgive than to hold grudges. The brave men we met today showed us that courage." And added, "I hope you remember that history doesn't have to define our future. We honor the past by learning from it, not by repeating it. Your generation has a chance to build friendships we could only dream about." The young journalist thanked him, his hand shaking slightly as he turned off his recorder. As he walked away and saw him wipe his eyes, the Lord Mayor announced that the formal program was concluding. Guests began gathering their belongings, but nobody seemed eager to leave. The energy in the room had changed throughout the day. People had arrived as strangers following protocol. They were leaving as humans who had shared something meaningful, and made their way back to Heinrich Mueller one final time. The old veteran looked tired but peaceful. His eyes had a clarity they didn't have when she first met him. "Mr. Mueller, I want you to know something," and said, kneeling beside him again. "You came here seeking forgiveness, but you've given us all a gift. You've shown us that it's never too late to seek peace. You've reminded us why this friendship between our nations matters so much. Heinrich took her hand weakly. Your Highness, I will sleep tonight without nightmares for the first time in 70 years. You have freed me from my prison. We freed each other and whispered. She stood and turned to find Maria Hoffman, the elderly German woman who had cried during the ceremony. Maria was speaking with a group of British women her age, laughing about something, and smiled, seeing how naturally they interacted, as if they had been friends for decades instead of hours. The German president began saying his official goodbyes. He shook hands with the Lord Mayor, thanked the staff, and spoke briefly with key diplomats. But when he came to him for final farewell, something unscripted happened. Instead of formal handshake, he bowed deeply and said, Your Royal Highness, you have shown me what true nobility means. It has nothing to do with titles or crowns. It has everything to do with how you treat people. And, moved by his sincerity, replied, Mr. President, you have shown me that leadership is about having the courage to face difficult history honestly. Thank you for that. They shook hands, and this time, she placed her other hand over his. The photographers captured it, the image that would appear on front pages around the world the next morning, as the president's motorcade pulled away from the Guildhall and remained standing at the entrance. Crowds had gathered outside, larger than when she arrived. They weren't just British citizens. German families living in London had come too, holding small flags of both nations. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, broke free from her mother's hand and ran toward and with a drawing. Security moved to stop her, but held up her hand. Let her come. The child, with blonde pigtails and a shy smile, handed in a crayon drawing. It showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One wore a crown. The other wore a suit. At the bottom, in wobbly letters, it said, Friends, and knelt down to the child's level. Did you draw this yourself? The girl nodded, too nervous to speak. It's beautiful. It's perfect. Thank you so much. The child's mother called out, She's half British, half German, Your Highness. She wanted you to know that's possible because of days like today, and felt tears threatening to fall, but she held them back. She waved at the crowd, got into her car, and as it pulled away, she finally let the tears come. In her hand, she still held the child's drawing. That simple picture represented everything the day had been about. Hope, friendship, a future built on forgiveness instead of fear. The Guildhall stood behind her, holding the memories of this extraordinary day within its ancient walls, ready to inspire generations yet to come.